Rain poured over the small, forgotten village as though the heavens themselves mourned her birth. Amara and Amira came into the world joined at the neck, 2 heads, 1 body, 1 heart. The villagers called them cursed, an omen of shame. Their mother wept every night, praying to the stars for mercy, but her tears changed nothing. The girls grew up behind walls, hidden from sight, their only companions each other, 2 souls bound in rejection, 2 voices echoing through loneliness. By the time they turned 19, whispers spread faster than the wind. No man would dare look at them, no family would take them in. Until one day, an old matchmaker arrived, her face veiled in mystery. "There is one man," she said in a voice laced with secrecy. "He has nothing but his name, yet he is willing to marry you." The mother hesitated, heart torn between fear and hope. But in a world that had already rejected them, even the smallest spark of kindness felt like salvation. The wedding was quiet, too quiet. The groom, a man named Kofi, wore simple clothes, his eyes deep with thought, his smile faint but genuine. When he took Amara and Amira's trembling hands, something strange flickered in his gaze, not pity, not disgust, but a quiet kind of understanding. The villagers laughed behind their backs, calling it the union of misfortune. Still, the sisters felt warmth for the first time. Kofi built them a home at the edge of the forest, small but filled with light. Days turned to weeks. Kofi was gentle, humble, and wise beyond measure. He rose early, worked tirelessly, and returned every evening with food, laughter, and stories of places the girls had never seen. But there was something he never spoke of, the letters that arrived in golden envelopes, the way he sometimes disappeared at dawn and returned smelling of fine perfume and foreign soil. One night, when the moon burned bright over their little house, Amara noticed a glimmer beneath the floorboard. She lifted it quietly, and there, beneath the dust, lay a key of pure gold. Her heart raced. Amira tried to stop her, whispering, "Don't. If he hides it, it must be for a reason." But curiosity won. The next morning, when Kofi left for the fields, the sisters followed the path he always took, only this time, they went farther than before. Beyond the forest, they stumbled upon something they had never imagined, an enormous iron gate guarded by men in black suits. At the sight of them, the guards stiffened but quickly bowed. "Madams," one of them said, "we weren't told you would arrive early." The sisters froze, confused. "Arrive where?" Amira asked. The man's expression changed. "To the estate, of course. The master has been expecting you." Their hearts thundered. As the gate opened, their world changed forever. Before them stretched a vast mansion, its marble walls gleaming beneath the sun, fountains dancing with crystal water. Servants lined up in rows, bowing low. And in the distance, there he was, Kofi, no longer dressed in rags, but in a tailored suit, standing at the top of the steps like a king who had been waiting for his queens. The sisters' breath caught. Amara whispered, "Who are you?" Kofi descended slowly, his smile both tender and tragic. "I am who I've always been," he said softly. "But the world saw you as cursed, and I wanted you to love me before knowing my name." Tears welled in their eyes as truth dawned. Kofi was not a poor farmer. He was Kofi Mensa, heir to one of the wealthiest dynasties in the land, a man who had left his riches behind in search of something no amount of gold could buy, acceptance. He took their hands once more. "Now that you are mine, the world will see your beauty the way I do, not as a curse, but as a miracle." Yet even as joy filled their hearts, shadows lingered in the corners of that grand estate. For not everyone welcomed their arrival. In secret chambers, jealous eyes watched from the dark, plotting to ensure that the 2-headed girl who had once been rejected would never sit proudly beside a billionaire. A week after moving into the mansion, Amara and Amira still couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were listening. Every corridor seemed to whisper secrets, every servant's glance carried a hidden meaning. They were treated with respect, yes, but not warmth. The maids bowed deeply but spoke in hushed tones once their backs were turned. Some crossed themselves, muttering prayers as the sisters passed. It was as though wealth had changed nothing, the rejection had simply become quieter, better dressed, wrapped in silk and gold. Kofi noticed their unease. One evening, as the sun melted into a crimson horizon, he took them to the balcony overlooking the gardens. "The world fears what it doesn't understand," he said gently. "But you must never shrink for their comfort. You are not a burden, you are my destiny." His words lingered in the air, sweet and heavy, but Amara couldn't ignore the question burning in her mind. "Then why hide this life from us? Why make us believe you were poor?" Kofi's jaw tightened. "Because I needed to know if your hearts were true," he said, his eyes darkening with something between pain and pride. "I have seen men and women worship gold and forget love. I wanted to find someone who would choose me, not my name." Amira's voice softened. "But we chose you when we had nothing." He smiled faintly. "And that's why you are here." That night, he gave them each a small velvet box. Inside, Amara found a ring of emerald and Amira one of sapphire, both set in gold so pure it shimmered even in candlelight. "You will wear these," Kofi said, "so the world knows who you belong to, and who belongs to you." But far beneath the beauty of the moment, the mansion was stirring. Behind the polished doors and painted halls, there were people who hated that two conjoined girls had entered their master's life. Chief among them was Lady Abina, Kofi's aunt and the true keeper of the family fortune. She was a woman carved from ambition, her face as cold as marble, her heart colder still. "She will ruin everything," Abina hissed to her advisor, her jeweled fingers clutching a wine glass. "That creature. Those girls will drag his name into the mud. The board will never accept them." The advisor, a thin man with eyes like a rat's, bowed. "Shall I take care of it, madam?" Abina's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Not yet. We must first make them fall from grace." Slowly. Days later, strange things began to happen. Dishes shattered in their rooms without reason. The maids started avoiding them altogether. Once, a portrait of Kofi's ancestors was found torn apart, and the blame, of course, fell on the sisters. "They said they saw you near the gallery," one servant whispered. "You mustn't make the master angry." Amara felt fury boiling in her chest. "They lie," she shouted. But no one listened. Only Kofi stood by them, though even he seemed distracted, often locked away in his study for hours, speaking in low tones with people they never met. When they asked what troubled him, he only said, "Business matters." But the worry in his eyes told a different story. One night, when thunder rolled across the sky, Amira woke to the sound of footsteps outside their chamber. Soft, careful, deliberate. She nudged Amara awake, whispering, "Someone's there." The door creaked open ever so slightly. Through the sliver of light, they saw a shadow move, tall, thin, holding something metallic that gleamed in the dark. Before fear could take full shape, the figure vanished, leaving behind a faint scent of jasmine and smoke. By morning, Kofi's aunt had summoned them to the main hall. "You girls seem to bring chaos wherever you go," she said smoothly, her voice like silk over knives. "Do you know that a family heirloom went missing last night? A diamond worth more than your mother's life." The accusation struck like a slap. "We stole nothing." Amara cried, trembling with rage. Abina only smiled. "Then you won't mind if I have your room searched." Servants tore through their things, scattering dresses and jewelry, overturning chests and drawers, and then came the moment that shattered the little piece they had left. Inside Amira's bedside cabinet, hidden beneath folded scarves, was the missing diamond necklace. The hall fell silent. Amira's lips trembled. "That's not mine. Someone put it there." Kofi arrived moments later, face pale with disbelief. His eyes darted between his aunt and the sisters, and though his voice was steady, the hurt beneath it was unmistakable. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "Did you take it?" Amara shook her head fiercely. You know us, Kofi. You know we wouldn't. But Abina's smirk spoke louder than any word. They've disgraced you already, she said coldly. Send them back to the filth they came from before they drag you down too. Kofi looked at the twins for a long, heavy moment. Then, without a word, he turned and left the hall. That silence broke something inside them. For 2 days, he didn't come to their room. The mansion felt emptier than ever, and the servants' whispers grew crueler, louder. The sisters barely slept. Amira wept in the dark, clutching Amara's hand, whispering, "They're going to drive us away." On the third night, unable to bear the waiting, Amara decided to find proof. She crept through the mansion's corridors with only a lantern for light, Amira following closely behind. They passed through the west wing, where the air smelled of old perfume and dust, until they reached the locked study where Kofi kept his files. The golden key from their old cottage still hung around Amara's neck. She tried it, and to her surprise, it turned. Inside, papers lay scattered across the desk, financial documents, letters, and photographs. But one letter caught their attention. It was from Lady Abina herself, addressed to someone named Mr. Kenu. The contents froze their blood. Proceed as discussed. The girls must be disgraced before the investors' gala. Once they're gone, Kofi will have no choice but to return control of the estate to me. Amira gasped. She planned everything. But before they could hide the letter, the door behind them burst open, and there stood Lady Abina, her eyes blazing with fury, flanked by 2 guards. Well, she hissed, I wondered how long it would take before the beasts learned to read. She snatched the letter from Amara's hand and tore it in 2. No one will believe you, she said. You're nothing but a sideshow act wrapped in silk. The guards moved forward, but before they could grab the sisters, a deep voice thundered from the doorway. Enough. It was Kofi. His presence filled the room, his expression carved in anger and betrayal, but not at the sisters. His eyes were locked on his aunt. I heard everything, he said coldly. You plotted against my wife, against me. Abina's composure cracked. You can't possibly mean to keep them, she spat. They'll ruin your name. My name means nothing, Kofi interrupted, stepping closer. But theirs will mean everything before I'm done. The guards hesitated, unsure of what to do. Kofi turned to the sisters, his voice softening. Come with me, he said. You don't belong among vipers. But before they could take a step, Abina's trembling hand reached for the candelabrum on the table, and in a desperate act of fury, she flung it toward them. Flames erupted as it struck the curtains, fire spreading with terrifying speed. Smoke filled the air. The sisters screamed as Kofi rushed to their side, pulling them toward the door, but the corridor outside was already blazing. They could barely see. Amira coughed, her lungs burning, Amara clinging to Kofi's arm as he searched for another way out. The mansion, that grand palace of gold and lies, had become a cage of fire, and deep within its walls, something far darker than betrayal was waiting to emerge. The flames roared like an angry beast, devouring everything in sight. Smoke curled around the chandeliers as the once grand mansion trembled under its own fury. The world blurred in a storm of fire and panic. Kofi held Amara and Amira close, shielding their faces with his jacket as burning wood fell from above. They could barely breathe, their shared lungs gasping for air thick with ash. Kofi, this way. Amira cried, pointing toward a shattered window glowing with the faint light of the moon. But the path was blocked, the fire had already claimed the hall. Behind them, Lady Abina's voice echoed through the chaos. Kofi, she screamed, stumbling as smoke surrounded her. Help me. For a moment, Kofi hesitated. This woman had tried to destroy everything he loved, yet she was family. Amara tugged his arm. Leave her. She'd have let us die. But Kofi shook his head, his eyes full of pain. I won't let hatred make me what she is. He ran through the flames, coughing, his figure barely visible. Amira clung to her sister, terrified, watching as he disappeared into the smoke. Every second felt endless. The walls moaned, the ceiling groaned, and heat scorched their skin. Just when Amara thought she'd lost him, Kofi emerged again, dragging Abina by the arm, her fine gown torn and burned, her eyes wild with disbelief. He set her near the window, and with all his strength, broke through the glass with a chair. Cold night air rushed in, slicing through the heat. "Go," he shouted. Amara and Amira climbed out first, helping Abina after them. Kofi followed last, just as the ceiling collapsed behind him in a thunderous crash that swallowed the room they had escaped from. They stumbled out into the courtyard, gasping, covered in soot and trembling. The mansion blazed behind them like a living inferno, the legacy of generations burning to the ground. Servants gathered in shock, some weeping, some silent. Kofi turned to face his aunt, who lay on the grass, her face streaked with tears and soot. "You saved me," she whispered, disbelief cutting through her voice. "After everything I did." Kofi looked at her with calm sadness. "Because mercy is worth more than revenge," he said softly. "And because love taught me that no curse is greater than hatred." The word struck something deep in Abina. She covered her face and wept, not from pain, but from shame. As dawn broke, the fire finally died, leaving behind nothing but smoke and memories. The once proud estate was now a skeleton of blackened stone and ashes. Yet in that ruin, something new was born. Kofi, Amara, and Amira moved to a quiet hill overlooking the ruins. For the first time, the twins felt peace. The morning wind brushed against their faces, cool and forgiving. Birds began to sing, their melodies soft and hopeful. Kofi reached for their hands. "Everything I had, all the gold, the power, the name, none of it mattered," he said, his voice low and steady. "But you gave me what no fortune could, truth, loyalty, and love that sees beyond appearances." Amara's eyes shimmered with tears. "You saw beauty where the world saw a monster. And now," Kofi said with a small smile, "the world will see what I see." Months passed. News of the fire spread far beyond the village, and so did the story of the man who had married the two-headed girl, not out of pity, but out of love. People came from towns and cities to see them, not out of curiosity, but admiration. The once rejected sisters became a symbol of strength and unity. With Kofi's guidance, they rebuilt the land from ashes. But instead of restoring the old mansion, they built something new, a sanctuary for those the world had cast aside. Orphans, widows, the disfigured, and the forgotten found a home there. The twins led with compassion, teaching others to see beauty where fear once lived. They called it the House of Grace. One day, as the sisters walked through the blooming gardens, they found Abina sitting on a bench, gazing at the sky. Her once proud posture was gone, replaced by quiet humility. "I was blind," she murmured as they approached. "I spent my life protecting a name that meant nothing. And you reminded me what humanity looks like." Amira smiled faintly. "We all wear masks until life burns them away." Abina looked at them, her voice trembling. "Can you ever forgive me?" Amara and Amira exchanged a glance. "Forgiveness," they said together, "is the fire that purifies what hate has poisoned." The old woman broke into tears, and for the first time, she embraced them, not out of duty, but out of love. Years flowed like rivers, and the House of Grace grew into a beacon across the land. The villagers who once mocked the twins now brought their children to learn kindness from them. Travelers spoke of the sisters with reverence, calling them, the two souls, one heart. Kofi watched it all with pride. He stood beside them, not as a billionaire, not as a savior, but as a man who had found his truth in the most unexpected place. But fate, as always, has its poetry. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the horizon, Kofi fell ill. The doctors came and went, but his strength faded like light slipping beneath the waves. He asked to see Amara and Amira one last time. They came to his bedside, their faces pale, eyes glistening. Don't leave us, Amira whispered. He smiled faintly. I'm not leaving, he said, his voice weak but warm. Love doesn't die, it changes shape. It becomes the wind that touches your hair, the sun that warms your face, the stars that guide your nights. Amara sobbed quietly. We can't be without you. You never will, Kofi murmured, his fingers brushing theirs. You are my legacy. You turned rejection into reverence. Promise me you'll keep shining, even when I'm gone. And as the last light left his eyes, a strange peace filled the room, soft, endless, like a breath of eternity. They buried him beneath a great tree overlooking the valley, where the rebuilt house stood proud and full of life. The inscription on his stone read. Asterisk, here rests the man who saw beauty where others saw brokenness. Asterisk. Years later, when people spoke of the legend of Kofi and the two-headed girl, they didn't tell it as a tale of pity or deformity, they told it as a story of divine love, of strength born from rejection, of two souls who proved that the human heart is not measured by what it looks like, but by how deeply it can love. In the evenings, when the wind passed through the gardens of the House of Grace, it carried whispers of laughter, Kofi's, Amara's, and Amira's, echoing together as if time itself refused to part them. And in that sound, anyone who listened closely could feel it, the pulse of something eternal, something magnificent, the truth that love, in its purest form, makes even the most rejected souls unforgettable. Because legends don't always wear crowns. Sometimes, they wear scars, and still shine brighter than gold.